Hello, everybody. This is Professor Hill. It's a short video for our class, Introduction to Ethics Philosophy 2306 here at St. Philip's College for the summer of 2025. And believe it or not, it is Friday, the 4th of July. So happy 4th of July, everybody. And but I'm actually here and continuing to do some work in the office and catching up because even though it's a holiday, sorry about that, we've got an essay due Sunday night, and I had a couple of quick questions from students, so I wanted to clarify for them and for everybody because they were raising really good points about two things. One of which was that the reading for the week was not in the textbook. I mentioned this in my last video, but then I realized I had posted it at the channel. I hadn't really sent it out to everybody as an announcement, so that's my bad. Sorry about that. So I'll put that together in the announcement today. I'll catch up because that was from the second, I guess. Is that right? Yeah. Anyway, today is Friday, July the 4th. And the message of the day is two things. One of which is the readings are in the modules. They say International Humanitarian Law. And there's just a couple of different PDFs and links which help explain the concept of international humanitarian law. So we're just trying to get our hands wrapped around the concept of what that means, a little bit of the history of it. There's a great video called The Story of an Idea, which explains the origins of the Red Cross, the International Committee of the Red Cross. And then also how it's kind of evolved over time since the middle of the 19th century. So learning a little bit about international humanitarian law for the modules, but then also, and this is the second thing of the day, I use this kind of term of art, which is sources of authority. And somebody, a couple of people wrote to me and said, what do you mean by that in this context? And it's simply this, which is we're born into a time and a place. And from the time we're born, especially as we grow and develop from infants to adolescents to young children to, young adults, we're subject to and we learn about different sources of authority that help guide us and give us rules and regulations and customs and mores. So it's a lot of different things because under that very big umbrella of sources of authority, there's lots of different types. Meaning, for example, the most, the ones we're most familiar with are our parents. As we're growing up, we're kids. They're there to protect us and care for us and provide for us, but also to guide us and teach us about the rules and what we can do and not do and why. And obviously, family authority is very, individual specific, meaning that depending on the circumstances in which you grow up, that might be, your grandmother. It might be the mom you live with, or might have both parents that are both sources of authority as you're growing up. So sometimes it's more generalized to the family or caretakers. But then we go to school and there's teachers, they're a source of authority. Coaches, we get into religious leaders, priests and rabbis and others who are also a source of a religious authority. And then let me just turn this down for a second. Good Lord. Can't have this thing dinging through the whole video here. All right, that's better. I promise I'll get back to the world once I finish this. All right. So anyway, it turns out that, but there's others, like somebody wrote me about, was this about the police? Because the police, the state, is a good source of authority because we have very clear, definitive laws and punishments for violating those laws. There's a whole criminal justice system out there. So it can be a lot of different things with different levels. Some things we participate in voluntarily, like if you join a church, and there's a source of authority there for internal church rules, you can always leave that. The same thing is also true about like state laws. You can move from one state to another and have a very different set of laws. You can leave the country. People immigrate all the time. So some of these things are optional depending on resources, but also more than that, it's about trying to identify them ahead of time for you and your life, because when we run into difficult ethical dilemmas, one of the things we want to check with are our sources of authority. I give an example of somebody who is a soldier at Fort Sam, drives down the street, comes down North Walters to come to class at St. Philip's College, and here's on campus for class, and then turns around and drives back to the base. Well, that person in that very kind of common or familiar example might be subject to a whole lot of different types of sources of authority. The first of which is, if you're a soldier on base, there's the whole military code. There's a military code, uniform code of military justice. There are rules, and there's going to be different by branch. There's going to be different, again, orders that apply to people. Like, there might be a standing order on a base. Even if you got permission to come down to go to college to take a class, being part of the military, you're subject to a very different set of authority than you would be if you're a civilian. Same thing true. You got to come past the Antioch Missionary Baptist Church. Well, if you're a member of like the Catholic Church, there's a whole group of, sets of rules that go with that, and the sources of authority, your priest, your bishop, the Pope. They've got canon law and church law and rules. And again, there's different levels of authority and influence on people, but they're all sources of authority. You're going down the street, you're subject to the state laws of Texas. You're subject to the municipal code of San Antonio and Bexar County and of the United States. So there's these different levels, even just within the legal framework. There's going to be city, county, state, federal, all of those, in addition to like the military laws. So I mentioned the religious. Also, you get onto campus, and also as a student, you have certain responsibilities and obligations. There's rules that apply to you as a student. You might not have known that when you signed up to take a class, but yeah, there's a code of student conduct, which you're subject to. And so there's a different authority with teachers and deans and other people to enforce the rules that are unique to the academic community of St. Philip's College. Things about cheating, but also fighting other students. There's all kinds of rules about being a college student. So all of that would count as sources of authority. And I'm just curious about the ones which you think apply, ones which guide you and your formation ethically over time. And so that's when I say appeal to that, mention that, that's what I'm talking about. So I wanted to mention both the readings are in the modules and then also this definition of the sources of authority. So that's all helpful and important to you. All right. So let me know. I've been answering questions today. Like I said, it's Friday. It's a holiday. There's nobody around. But I wanted to come in and make sure I had a chance to catch up with the communications, that requests for help and information. Because again, as we get closer to the end, I want to make sure that everybody knows where we are, what we're doing, and make sure it's all clear. All right. So take care of yourselves. Let me know if I can be of any help. And at some point too, as we get closer to the end, I'll mention just briefly that there is a student evaluation that the college does. That would be very helpful, obviously. There's also one that students tell me is important to them. It's this ratemyprofessor.com. Apparently students check it and they trust it because it's anonymous. And if you like somebody or don't like somebody, you can just put in whatever you want. And so I would encourage you to do that as well. I'll put a link in there to make that easy for you. Just because it doesn't affect me directly, but it does help other students, which is why I think it has some value. Okay. Well, listen, take care of yourselves. I hope you have a good 4th of July. I hope you get some time off this weekend. I know a lot of people, it just means more work, but let me know if I can be of any help to you guys. All right. Take care, and I'll talk to y'all soon.